Hi everyone, it's Claire here, and today's video is my top 5 tips for those nude cloth pads that have chosen to go down the buying route for their stash as opposed to sewing. There will be a video of my top 5 tips for sewing your own cloth pads, but in this video we're going to be dealing with all about buying your own stash. So number 1 is how to know what to buy, because it seems the most obvious one to deal with. When you start looking at cloth pads, you are going to see so many different designs, shapes, versions of core, width once snapped. The one thing there is not in the cloth pad world is a standardized anything across the board. Now, this is something you will come to love as you start experiencing cloth pads and building your stash. But when you're new, it can be extremely disorientating, to say the least, because you're like, well, what on earth do I need? I mean, they all look so different. They're all different widths. How am I meant to know? So this first one, we're going to take a look at how to know what to buy as a starting place. That would be helpful, right? So look at your disposables. You definitely need to look at your disposables for a starting point. So if we look at length to start with, one of the questions you'll see around is how long do I need for a cloth pad? Now, if you're currently using disposable pads, this will help you greatly as a starting point, because if you're currently using a 10-inch pad, get them out and take a ruler to them. A 10-inch pad, and that's working great for you. You are not leaking off of the back, you're not leaking off of the front, you're not leaking off of the sides. It's working great. Then lengthwise, you probably want to start with around a 10-inch in cloth. The same as if you use a nighttime pad as your day pad and all through your cycle, then give that a measure. And if that pad's working for you, then that's the length of pad to start with. Now, if you're currently using a 10-inch disposable pad, but having problems with leaking off the back or the front, and you're in despair, and that's why you're looking around for different options and you've come to cloth pads, then obviously you need some extra length there. So you will want to go up a couple of inches from the current disposable pad you are using. If you are a tampon user, things are a little bit more difficult when it comes to length, because you don't really know your bleeding pattern. You don't know if you're a centre, a front or a back bleeder. If you have no clue whatsoever, I would say go with your flow. So if you are lighter to regular, then maybe stick around sort of the 10, 11-inch pads, which is right there in the middle. If you have a heavier menstrual flow, then you might want to go for, say, a 12-inch just as a starting point to try out. They're the kind of 10, 11 and 12 seem to be the sort of in the middle most popular sizes in cloth pads. So it's a great place to start if you have absolutely no idea what length to go for. You can always go down a bit, you can always go up a bit, but that's a good place to start with length. Then there's shape. Now, regardless of what fancy patterns are out there, whether it be like the kitty cat cloth in front of you on the video there, whether it be some fancy shapes, there's penguin, there's all sorts of things, different versions of round, different versions of square, and all sorts of things. Straight edged, rounded edge, you name it. There's pretty much only 2 styles really, if you take design features out of it. And that is symmetrical and asymmetrical. So asymmetrical pad is, as it would suggest, the same at both ends. So if the pad is folded in half, it is equal. An asymmetrical pad means that if it's folded in half, it will have more length at the back, or if it's a specific front bleeder pad, at the front. So we have asymmetrical and symmetrical. Now, if you are a centre bleeder, or you bleed just a little bit to the front or a little bit to the back, then you will probably be fine starting out with an asymmetrical pattern. If you are a back bleeder, then you will probably want to go for an asymmetrical pattern that will give you more coverage at the back. If you are a front bleeder, you can buy the asymmetrical pattern that most sellers offer a version of and turn it around for your front bleeding. Or some sellers have a pattern they specifically call a front bleeder pattern. Either way, you want the asymmetrical for your pattern. So regardless of the style, like this one, for example, that's a cat shaped. This is asymmetrical. This one is a completely different shape again. And this is symmetrical. So that's how to tell what shape. Next, you will hear about width once snapped. Now that is, as the name would suggest, the width once the poppers are snapped. Now this is, in a sense, more important than all the rest, because this is where, if you're going to leak or have a problem, it's going to probably be in the middle here with the width once snapped. Now, if you have a pad that is too wide for your underwear and for you, then when you put your legs together, it will do this. And you'll end up with a bunched pad that's very uncomfortable. And obviously, as you can see, that could cause leaking. If you have a pad that is too narrow for your underwear, it's going to cause your underwear to bunch underneath. And it's going to bring in, obviously, the width across here, and you may not have enough coverage. So again, it could lead to leaking. So a good starting point for what your width once snapped should be is to grab a pair of your period knickers. Now, a word of note about your knickers. With cloth pads, they do need to be snug fitting underwear, not uncomfortably tight, but snug fitting. So you can't go wearing your granny pants with your cloth pads, because that's not going to work out. So grab a pair of your knickers. If you wear the same knickers all month, grab those. If you wear period pants, grab those. Then you want to open them up like so. So you can see the crotch, gusset, whatever it is you want to call this. Take a ruler and measure across the center. If I can line it up. Now, as you can see, that says 2.75. So that would be an ideal width for you to start with, as you know this is going to fit your underwear perfectly and probably be the correct width for you. So that's a great starting point. So this is 2.75, which is my ideal width and works great for me. I can occasionally go up a bit or down a bit. For example, in liners, I like it thinner, but to start off with, don't be too complicated and go for your underwear width in the gusset. Now for lights, regulars, heavies, nights, obviously postpartum if you are postpartum. Again here, it doesn't matter if you use disposables or tampons. A good place to start is with what you're currently using. So if you currently use regular disposable pads or regular tampons and you do not leak with them, they work great for you, then go for a regular cloth pad. If you currently use heavy in disposables or tampons, a heavy. If you're using supers or night pads all day, then you want to start with night pads. Now, one thing to note here as well, on a little side topic, is often when ladies come to cloth, they will make comments like, it lightened my flow. So I need a lighter style of pad than I did in disposables or tampons. Now, the reason this is talked about so much, there's no scientific evidence cloth pads does anything like that. They don't contain anything that would account for that. So unless you have severe allergy to chemicals, it's not likely to change anything about your cycle. However, for example, this is a bamboo velour topper. Instead of like in a disposable pad, it takes in the gel, you see it differently. It looks different, it spreads, because that's the whole way that it keeps it in. It spreads in the gel and then gets suspended. It looks very different to on a cloth pad. So when you bleed onto your cloth pad, if you have a good topper, it will take it straight into the core and you won't see as much blood. Cloth pads also tend to hold more, so you're wearing it for longer and seeing less. So it looks like you're having a lighter flow, which is why I recommend starting with what you're currently using, but don't be surprised if you are able to go down one in your cloth pads, because they will often hold more and your bleeding pattern will look slightly different. So that is what to order. The next on top tips for buying is research. Research the maker. If you have found a maker or two makers and you're thinking, great, they've got fabrics I like the look of their pads, they're in my price range, and you're going to purchase, make sure that you research into the maker. If they have a Facebook page, go on there and look through the pictures of their products so you can gauge what the sewing skill is like from pad to pad. There will also be information on there on what's in their pads, how they go about making their pads. They could have reviews on their Facebook page, so check those out. And other people will have commented on their page, so you can get a feel for what people think of the pads. If they have an Etsy shop, check that out and read the reviews, because it's another great way of finding out what people think of the end product that has been delivered to them. Obviously, if they have quite a lot of bad reviews, you probably don't want to shop there. Another place to look when researching a maker is on YouTube, as most makers have at least one video featuring their pads these days. So you get kind of a more real time, if you like, look at the pad as opposed to a flat photograph, and you get to hear some comments on the stitching and how someone's found it. So that could be helpful to you. Also, ask questions. If something is not listed, like the width once snapped, or you are looking for a different width once snapped, or you want to know what's in the cores, you want a different backer, you have an allergy, you're not really sure what to order, message the maker. Most makers have great customer service. They are happy to talk you through their products, what they use, and help you find the right product from them for you. So do not be afraid to ask questions. Don't be embarrassed. These makers will have heard it all before, so there's nothing you can ask that will probably shock them. People often do get embarrassed about asking menstrually related questions. Don't worry about it, just message them. But research the product and make sure it's what you're after and what's suitable for you. Number 3, how many to buy. This is a huge one. I mean, honestly, I just really hope that I can get this message out there, because it can save you a lot of money. You may come across a maker that's pads look amazing. The stitching looks amazing. The shape is amazing. They have the most amazing fabrics. You can literally sit there and pick out 10 fabrics. You may have put money aside for your stash. You can buy it all in one go, or you may be looking to bulk buy 6 pads or something. Don't. I honestly can't say enough. Please don't. If you have not tried pads before, or even if you have tried pads before, but this seller uses a different shape, a different width, a different core, don't invest in a load at once. Because the thing is, it doesn't matter how great the stitching is and how great the fabrics are. If you get that pad home and you're like, well, actually, I needed 2 inches more at the back. I needed this to be a bigger width once snapped. I needed more coverage at the front. The core is not enough for me, or it's too much. You're going to be stuck with pads that you can't use, possibly. Now, although you can destash them in the Facebook destash groups, you're going to lose several pounds, a few dollars or euros, etc. per pad that you sell on, and could end up losing a considerable amount of money during the destash process. So really try, and I know it's hard because I mean, I love fabric. Oh my gosh, I look at some places and I'm like, right, I need one of this, one of this, one of this, one of this. And even now with new makers, I still keep to this rule for myself, unless I have definitely tried the core, etc. they're using before. Do not invest in too many, because it could be an expensive mistake to make. Buy 1 or 2, try them. If you love them, you can go back and buy 6, 12, however many you want after that. But can't get my words out. You're much less likely to make a mistake that's costly if you stick to the 1 or 2 pad rule with a new maker. then you can go back and buy up all the pads you want once you know that you love them. What number are we on now? 4. I'm losing track. Number 4 is just really a quick word on international buying of pads. I love buying pads internationally, but I can't afford to do it all the time. This one here is from Australia, these to America, and this is the UK where I am. Now, anything that comes into the UK from other countries such as the US or Australia are open to customs charges, customs and holding fees basically. So when something comes in from America or Australia, the limit is £15 here in the UK. That's not what you spent on pads, that also includes your postage. So whatever's been put on the custom forms of how much the pads were that you paid and how much the postage that the seller paid to send them to you is included. Once you hit the £15, your pads will be held by Royal Mail and a card will be left for you saying how much you need to pay to release them basically. Now this starts at £11 and goes up depending on how much you have spent. So I'm in no way saying don't buy from other countries. I do it myself, but factor it into your budget. So if you are new to cloth and you have a very strict budget, it may not be the most economical way for you to start, because technically if you got charged £11, £14, then that, depending on the length and absorbency of your pads, could be 1 or 2 extra pads you could have had for your stash. So it's just something to be aware of, so you're not caught out when the card comes through and you didn't realise you had to pay this extra fee. So often if you go on the Royal Mail website here in the UK, they have lists of like countries that are included and how much everything costs and what the limits are, etc. If you're in the US or another country, I'm sure your postal system, whatever that may be, will have information on their website. So check that out, because it's not just the UK. The US, for example, if I sent something from here, would also have to pay incoming charges. And number 5 is a word about extremely cheap pads. Now, I'm not talking necessarily about China cheapies here. I've done a video on China cheapies if you want more information on those really cheap pads with the PUL wings, etc. But there are also makers out there that sell extraordinarily cheap pads. Now, the reason I bring this up is because there's been quite a few posts flying around over the last sort of month of people that have purchased pads at an insanely cheap price and then gone absolutely ballistic when they turn up and the wings are wonky or the stitching is thirds quality, and they're complaining about that. Now, as a buyer, as we mentioned earlier, you have responsibility to do your research. Don't get me wrong, sellers have a responsibility too, and I actually did a video on that about the selling cloth pads and responsibilities that come with it, but it can't all be placed on the seller. There are always going to be some unscrupulous sellers out there. There's not loads of them, it's a small amount, but you don't want to get done by the ones that are out there. So if you come across a 14-inch pad that they're saying is has an expensive core material such as Zorb or bamboo fleece, and they're charging you £4, £5 for it, when in most other makers this pad would be sort of £10, £11 or more, then you have to think to yourself, right, I need to look into this that bit more. I need to see if they've got any feedback. I need to make sure that I look at photos of their product and get photos of my product. If you're ordering customs blindly, that's not the best idea. Unless you can see other examples of their work, don't order blindly from anybody. It's like anything really. If it sounds too good to be true, it generally is too good to be true. If you've been looking at new cars and the car you want is £6,000 at the age you want with the type of mileage you want, and then you find someone selling that exact car, the exact age, the exact mileage, and it's £3,000 cheaper, that would ring alarm bells in pretty much everyone. Some people would avoid it like the plague from the get-go. Others would go round with a mechanic or get the AA round to look over the car before they agreed to purchase it. It's the same with cloth pads. We're not talking about the same level of money, but it's the same thing. You need to check what you're getting. And if it looks way cheaper than the other 12 makers you've looked at, there's probably a reason for that. Now, there are some makers that offer pads that are more budget friendly than others. We're not talking about them here. They may have lower overheads. Some makers just use flannel for their cores, so they have less overheads. So their pads might be £3 cheaper, £2 cheaper than someone else's pad. But if it's way too good to be true cheap, then it definitely warrants some research. Also, a word on destashed pads here. There is some great pads on the destash market. Some are completely new. People just bought too many or tried one of them because they ended up bulk buying people like we just spoke about, and then the rest are new and you could get some bargains. Some pads are used. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're okay with used pads, you can get some great bargains there, but make sure that you're seeing pictures in good light to check for stains, because you don't want to have a nasty surprise come through the post. If it's a legitimate seller that's not trying to mislead anyone, if you ask for a picture in better light that's not so dark, or you ask to see another picture of the back or a close-up of a certain area, then they will oblige and it won't be a problem. So just, keep your eyes open when you're shopping for these things, and just do some very simple checks that take really no effort or time at all, just to protect yourself. And always remember, pay with PayPal. If a seller asks you to send the money as a gift, do not do that. Oh, I really should have made this 6 top tips actually and covered PayPal, but I'm going to throw this in here at the end. Some sellers may ask you to pay via the gifts to family and friends with your PayPal. Do not do that. If you do that, then you have lost your PayPal protection if what turns up in the post has something the matter with it, is not as advertised, if it doesn't turn up at all. That is an alarm bell. You want to make sure that you send the money as a transaction. If they do not invoice you and they ask you to send it to their PayPal, don't try and do something nice and send it as a gift. Send it as a transaction and write in the notes what it is you're buying. That's really important, because then you have PayPal protection should anything go wrong. It's highly unlikely it will, but it's good to have that protection there. And that's really important when starting out with cloth pads. So I hope this has helped you on your way to buying your first cloth pad stash. That is it from me, and I will talk to you soon.